Thank you. So just, I know there's a few people here that don't know me. I'm Suzy Walker, and I am the creator of this Heartleaper Substack, which I'm very, very excited about. I'm the ex-editor of Psychology's magazine, and I've interviewed everyone from Oprah to Ruby Wax. And I am passionate about self-development. I have just made the big leap to live in Northumberland, and I'm loving it here. It's amazing. And I've started a festival called the Anik Story Fest. And part of this big push that I'm having is I still want to interview inspiring people. That's one of my highest values, is inspiration. And so I've been interviewing once a week very inspiring experts for the Big Happiness Interview for Metro. And when I was doing my review, my sort of one-year review, I looked at all the books that I'd read last year. And Simon, you were in the top 3 of the books, and I absolutely loved it. So I'm so delighted that you're joining us today. Let me introduce to you the wonderful Simon Alexander Ong. He's the Life Coach of the Year, winner of the 2023 Business Book Award for Wellness and Wellbeing. And I would say it's the book that I gave most to my friends and clients last year. So Simon, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Suzy, and great to meet all of you this evening.
Yeah, lovely day. Well, everyone stay on mute, and then I take questions from everyone later. But first of all, Simon, I want to ask you, the first question is, what is energy, and what do you define as energy?
So energy in its simplest form is our life force. Now, it's been something we've known for centuries, if not longer. In Indian culture, they would refer to this as prana, and it's a term we still use today in the practice of yoga. In Maori culture, they call it mana. In my Chinese culture, they call it chi. Even when you look at modern day cultures, you look at the film franchise of Star Wars, they refer to it as the Force. Now, whatever term or words we use to describe it, we're talking about the same thing, which is energy as a life force. Even when you look at the science behind it, what you understand is that we're all made up of energy. Now, the thing is, even though we know that at an intellectual level, we don't tend to nurture it in our everyday. And often when people talk about energy, when they say things such as I'm feeling exhausted or I'm drained, the first thing that comes to mind is our physical energy. So people will say things such as I need more rest, or I need more sleep, I need to move my body, I need to slow down, I need to eat better or eat healthier. But that's only one dimension of what energy is. The other dimensions which I touch on in the book are your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual energy. And so if you're only focusing on one stool of these 4 dimensions, then eventually you're going to burn out. And burnout can take various forms. You know, you have burnout spiritually. If you are doing work that is not aligned to your values, or work that betrays your skill set, you're doing things that don't make you feel alive, that's how we feel burnt out spiritually. We feel burnt out physically when we don't get enough rest, when we push our bodies beyond the limit and we don't feed it right. We are, in effect, punishing ourselves and committing an act of violence against our bodies when we do so. Yeah. Emotional and mental energy is all about understanding our mind, how we relate to ourselves and how we relate to others. Because one thing, and we can talk a bit more about this later, Suzy, but one thing I realized is that many, and I was also in the same boat here, I felt that we all lived in a common reality. But the fact is we all live in very customized realities. So what I mean by that is we live in the feeling of our thinking moment to moment to moment. An event itself does not have an emotion. So if a car crashes into a wall, the wall doesn't get angry and the car doesn't get sad. The event just is. But we as humans, we have to take meaning from an event. We have to derive meaning, and we all will have a different interpretation of it. So your friend might see the same event as good, you might see it as bad. And that then determines the choices and the behaviors that we make every day.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is as coaches, that's what we've kind of been doing for many, many years, is looking at how we frame something and the beliefs change. But sometimes the hardest bit is when you're not aware of a belief that's kind of bubbling on. It's a real subconscious belief. So how do you help people, first of all, to identify beliefs or the framing of something, and how do you really kind of nail it when it's a subconscious belief that's kind of weird, you know, you've got like a weird control thing going on and you don't understand what that's going on.
So two parts of the question there, Susie. So the first bit, you're right, it's about awareness. I'm a believer that you cannot have self-development without self-awareness, simply because you can't change what you're not aware of.
Yeah.
And that's why there's this common saying that goes, the longest journey that we humans make are the inches from our heads to our hearts. And that is because many of us simply aren't aware of the beliefs that run our life, the beliefs that drive the blueprint of our everyday, and the things that guide us in terms of the choices we make. But when we begin to understand the drivers behind the decisions we make, what happens, that begins the catalyst of change. Awareness sets in motion that process of change. Now, when I'm working with a client, as you said, Susie, sometimes people will come in and they'll have subconscious beliefs, even beliefs they're not aware of because they haven't explored them. And so for me, the process of coaching is really about creating a space where we can begin to explore the world that is in here. Because me coming as someone from the outside, I'm not going to know what's going on in anyone's mind until I start to understand what drives their thinking. The analogy I tend to give is, if you've ever watched a Sherlock Holmes TV series or film, what you will know is that when somebody comes to Sherlock and says, Sherlock, something's happened and I want to share it with you, you have to be able to help me solve this mystery. What happens is Sherlock doesn't go straight into offering tips and advice. Sherlock invites the person to sit in an armchair in his office. And Sherlock then begins asking a series of questions. And those questions allows him to understand what's going on in their head, but also what happened. And so he can kind of understand what the next steps are. And that's really the process of change, is that as somebody begins to articulate and verbalize what's going on in their mind, suddenly we can begin to make sense of our thoughts. The thing is, for a lot of us, we don't download our thoughts onto paper, or we don't share our thoughts with someone. And so we end up thinking about our thinking about our thinking about our thinking, and we get so caught up in our head that either we take no action, or we end up being impacted by scenarios that may or may not even happen. And so the process of developing that awareness is either to download them onto paper. That's why I think that writing is the cheapest form of therapy.
Yeah.
Or having a space where you can share with no judgment what is in your mind with someone. And if you have the ability to do that, to write or to share your thoughts, that for me is the beginning of understanding those beliefs and drivers that have been influencing your life today.
So let's say it was in a session, or it was or a writing prompt. What are some great questions that you would use to kind of, so let's just say that someone's come into your coaching room or into your presence, and they're absolutely exhausted. They're absolutely knackered, and they're like, I can't go on, I can't do this anymore, blah blah blah, I've got to find some new way of changing, whatever. And they want to either dump their husband or dump their job, or, you know, I always say dump the husband, but anyway, sorry. So what are some great questions to ask?
So for me, it's careful to distinguish between the feeling in the moment and the feeling that has been consistent with somebody. So they may just have gone through a bad week or a bad moment, and they've come in and they're going, I want to do all of this, I want to get rid of this because I'm just feeling exhausted and drained in that moment. So for me, it's important to distinguish between that feeling and the feeling of, this is something I've been experiencing for years. Now, they're two different things. But where I would start is to understand the difference. So the first question I may ask would be, when was the last time that you felt truly energized? And that gives me a reference point to understanding when that last time was. If it was a couple of months back, then hey, maybe it's not as bad as I think. But if it's, well, I can't remember, it's been years since I was in that position, then that tells me we've got perhaps some deeper work to do. So that will be the first question for me, to get some bearing and a reference point as to whether this is something or something that's been going on for a period of time. And then the process then is for me to go beyond the superficiality of their feeling. So if it's been years, the next question I might ask them is, what triggered you to want to come to me today? that you didn't want to come to anyone in the years prior? What was it about this moment that has made you come to seek help today? And again, that's going to open up another conversation, because then they'll share things, and from there, the question will come to me in the moment as to where to guide the conversation. But that's where I'll begin, is understand the reference points of whether this is something that has been long-term or whether this is something that has just happened recently. And that will then guide me as to where to take the conversation next.
So one of my things that I'm very passionate about is what we do with our lives in terms of our career. And I think what resonated mostly about your book is this idea of when we have a career that is completely draining our energy, that we're not following our values, that it's not about our skill set. And you think, I hate this job, but I've got to do it for the money, and or it's well paid, or whatever it is. What's the good questions to ask at that point, or what advice would you give to somebody who is having, it is their job that is draining their energy?
Yeah, so when it's the job draining the energy, sometimes what we need in that moment is a bit of perspective, because for a lot of us, we are putting off our dreams and our goals and the things we actually want to do until we're ready. Internally, we're saying things to ourselves such as, I just need to make sure I've got enough money before I can make the jump. I need to make sure I've got the security to make the jump. It's going to be very different in the short term because I'm getting all of my source of income from this one job. And so what happens is that we are creating this scenario of when I'm ready, all of these ducks will be lined up, and that's when I can make that jump. Now, the harsh reality is you probably won't make the jump, because there will never be a moment when you will have all your ducks lined up perfectly. I know someone, for example, who nearly got all of their ducks lined up perfectly to want to open a restaurant in January 2020. A few months later, COVID happened. Yeah. And nobody could open up their restaurants to serve customers. So as much as he wanted the ducks to be lined up, there are always going to be curveballs that are thrown your way.
Yeah.
And so the perspective we need to understand is that life is so short. It's something, and I share a story in the second chapter of my book where I lost my mum at the age of 17, and that really taught me how short and fragile life is. And I think that if we appreciated how short life is, we would make very different decisions. There's a post, Suzy, that I shared on social media earlier today, and somebody responded with a reframing of a question of how we can raise people's awareness on how short life is so we can channel our energy into truly living. And they reframed the question to simply ask people, what are you going to do while you are waiting to die? Because the fact is, we know death is guaranteed, but we don't know when. As soon as we're born, the clock is ticking. And so if we reframe a question, instead of saying, what do you want to do with your life? And everyone thinks, oh, well, I want to do all these grand things, and then we never take any action doing them. If we reframe it to include a bit of pain and say, what are you going to do as you wait to die? Then suddenly we realize how urgent time is. It reframes the perspective we have about our hopes and our dreams. Are we going to waste each day and hope the perfect time will arrive someday in the future when we're not even guaranteed to be around someday in the future? Or are we going to take one small bit of action today? And I think we underestimate the power of small action. I talk a lot about thinking big, but yes, thinking big is great, but you've got to start small. If you don't start, you're never going to get to where you want to be. And let's assume you only take one step each day. And we're thinking very simple and easy here. One step forward each day accumulates to 365 steps in a year. Just imagine where you could be a year from now. And that's just one step.
Yeah, I think that explains to me so much, perhaps why I resonate so much with your book, because I also lost my dad when I was 17. So for me, I think that kind of, as you say, a wake-up call of realizing this is not a dress rehearsal. But the other book in my top 3 is also Oliver Burkeman's book, which is 4,000 Weeks. Have you read that one?
Yeah, I've read that one actually, and there was a lot of things that we had similar. Just in case anyone hasn't read 4,000 Weeks, I was curious when I first saw the book, what is 4,000 Weeks about? And when I read the introduction, it shocked me to understand that 4,000 weeks is the average number of weeks that we have as humans on this planet. And in researching the book, he would ask a question. He would ask people, how many weeks do you think the average human has? And put on the spot, a lot of people would respond with something in the six figures. They might say, oh, I don't know, 150,000 weeks, 200,000 weeks. But he said, no, 4,000 weeks is what we have in terms of the average human lifespan. And so he wrote a book called 4,000 Weeks, which was detailing how we can live a life where we avoid the tragic scenario of living as if we are never going to die, and then dying having never really lived.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've just turned up the pain for us. Thanks. Cheered us all up with the talk of death. But I also feel, in a way, I've almost lived it the opposite way around. Because of that, I've lived really, really, and I got to 50 and I didn't have a pension. I didn't have anything. And I was like, okay, now I have to grow up and do something sensible with my life. Although I'm not. Can I just say I'm not? But why don't we do it? So there's a lot of fear. So there'll be a lot of blocks in the way we sabotage ourselves. So what are the most common fears that we think, oh, well, I'll just stay with the secure, when security is more important to us than risk, perhaps? How do we overcome that? I mean, you talked about baby steps earlier.
Yeah, and I think what happens here is that what I think stops a lot of people is this need of validation. So fear is one side of it, but validation is also an important part of it as well. So when we talk about fear, it could be fear of the unknown, fear of whether it's going to work, fear of whether you're ready, the fear of whether you're going to succeed. But on the other side, it's also validation, because at a subconscious level, we don't want to be seen as a failure amongst the eyes of our parents or our colleagues or our social circle or people closest to us. And so we want their validation. So if we are seen as somebody who, you know, is the black sheep of the family, or somebody who's not on the right path, that can influence us at a deep level. So I think what we need in order to begin on a path, especially when it's a path that would lead to where we ultimately want to be, the first thing we have to accept is whenever you embark on an unknown journey, nothing is certain. That's part of the game. But the way I see it is that when everything is unknown, anything is possible. Anything is possible. I mean, to give an example, when I left the corporate world and I started as an entrepreneur, the first thing I said to myself is, if I become a successful coach and I'm working with some amazing one-to-one clients, I'm going to be happy. And I'm going to be very proud of where I am. But what happened is things I could never predict. You know, I left my corporate job. I was working on my own 18 months into my journey as an entrepreneur. And then one of my clients said to me, Simon, have you thought about speaking? My company is putting together a series of seminars, and I think you'll be a great speaker. Can I put your name forward for these series of events? I said, sure, I love a good challenge. I've never been paid to speak before. Let's give this a go. And so I started doing speaking. That company was Barclays, and they enjoyed it so much, they invited me back to do another event. And we ended up shooting a commercial that went in the branches across the country, went in cinemas nationwide. And from there, in 2019, I then got invited to be interviewed on BBC and Sky News, which a year later then led to having a conversation with Penguin, the world's largest publishing house, to share my first book with the world. But none of those things were in my plan. The only thing I had in my mind was be a good coach, give value, and be successful in whatever I did. And so the lesson there is that, yes, when you start a journey that is unknown, it's going to be full of uncertainty. But again, when everything is uncertain, anything is possible. Literally anything is possible. And the second thing we need is courage. A lot of us mistakenly think that we have to be confident. I don't feel confident enough to do this, or I don't feel confident enough to make that leap, or I don't feel confident enough to try this thing that maybe could work, but I just need to wait until I'm confident enough. The thing is, you're never going to be confident enough. What you need at the beginning is courage. Courage builds your confidence. So it's the courage to say yes and not give in to your fears when your fears say no. It's the courage to put yourself out there, despite the fact you may get people that don't necessarily like what you do. It's the courage to go against the opinions of others so you can live a life true to yourself. And the thing is, as you take those small steps forward, two things kick in. The first is momentum. Once you start that feeling momentum, there's no going back. You have that feeling deep inside of you that says and whispers to you, I'm going places. What else could be possible? That feeling is incredible, by the way. And the second thing is confidence. When you show yourself that you can do things that you never thought you could do, that builds your confidence. And then when you got more confidence, you have greater courage to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that builds your confidence. So confidence is built by having the courage to do things that perhaps you didn't think you could do. And that's why it's so important to start small. Most of us, when we think about tackling our goals or working towards a compelling vision, we focus too much on the end result. And that can be overwhelming. You know, it's like somebody who's never run a marathon before, and they're so focused on completing a marathon in a specific time. And I'm thinking, like, no wonder you're going to feel overwhelmed, because if you never run a marathon before, I would be overwhelmed. So if I'm going to tackle that goal, I want to break it down to things that are going to give me confidence. It could be start going to the gym 3 times a week, and then start increasing the time I spend in the gym. Start putting together a nutrition plan. So you want to break things down to pieces that are manageable. And as you tackle each of those pieces, that begins to build your confidence, because now you're putting a solid foundation in place to become the person that can achieve those goals.
I mean, I absolutely agree with you around courage. Again, another one of my highest values. And I think the baby steps that it allows you. Someone said to me that don't go for confidence, go for competence. Learn how to be competent, and that will build your confidence. You know, that I thought that was really good. What about when you just can't be bothered? When you're just lazy and you're, you know, for me sometimes, you know, I plan my goals, and then, you know, at the moment we're a writing group at Heartleaper, and we're all writing. We turn up twice a week and we do our writing once, and then my goal for August is to write every day, you know, do 1,000 words a day, finish my book in August. Sometimes I'm lazy and I can't be bothered, and I'd rather stay in bed and da da da. How do we build that kind of, is it willpower, or how do we build that and become a little bit more motivated?
So I think there's 2 elements here. First of all, we have to accept there's no such thing as perfection. You are not going to be on point every single day. We are human. We're not robots. You're not going to be at your highest level of motivation and energy every single day. Of course, there are going to be days where you just want to lie in bed, where you want to have a day where you do absolutely nothing. And that's completely fine. We shouldn't strive to be 100% every single day. I'm not 100% every single day. The key thing is you want to be doing the habits and the routines the majority of the time. That's what's important. If you're putting together some solid routines and habits 60 or 70% of the time, I guarantee you will make far more progress than if those good habits were only in place 20% of the time. And so the key thing is you're doing these things the majority of the time. We have to make room for adapting and being flexible. You're going to get ill. There are going to be other things that come up in your calendar, and there are going to be days where energy just isn't there. Again, it's part of the human experience. So that's one side of it. The other side is often what I think people lack when it comes to motivation is a vision that is compelling and exciting in nature. Now, what I mean by this is when we think about motivation, there's 2 parts to it. There's a push and there's a pull part of motivation. To push someone is when I say to you, hey, Suzy, I really want you to do this. If you do this, I'm going to give you a bonus of £5,000. Now, what I'm doing is I'm pushing you to do something, but that's what we call short-term motivation. You would do it, but once you get the reward, you're going to stop doing it because you've got the reward. You can move on to the next thing. Long-term motivation is when you have something that pulls you forward, where you wake up in the morning and you just find yourself compelled to want to start writing. You find yourself compelled to want to make calls or to send emails or to plan the thing you want to move towards. The pull factor comes from a vision. When you have clarity on what that life looks like, when you have clarity on what that best version of you looks like, that's what pulls you forward. The way to explain this is when you book a holiday, if the holiday is 6 months away, the reason we're excited about it now, the moment we've booked and paid for it, is because our mind is already constructing the visual of what that holiday looks like. And then our mind is already thinking, what am I going to do when I get there? What are the tours or the things that I want to book in so I can experience it when I go on holiday? And the clearer and clearer you get about your holiday plans, the more excited you are. You know, if your flight was at 5 in the morning and you were going somewhere exotic for 2 weeks and you were flying business class, do you think you would need to find the motivation to get up and make it to the airport by 5? Probably not. You'll be there when you need to be there, because the allure of that vision, the holiday, the destination, the feeling of being there is pulling you forward. And so one hand is accepting that we're not perfect. On the other hand, it's getting absolute clarity on who is it and where you want to be, the person that you must become in order to make all of those things happen.
Yeah. So when you say the person that you want to become, it's about the being piece rather than the doing piece. And so where do we start with that? So how do we, I mean, it's about values. And I mean, is there a good exercise you can give to us to say, okay, who's the person I need to be to create the life that I really want, full of energy and
yeah. So that's the question I would ask people, is when they think about their vision and goal, the immediate question that comes to my mind is this: who must you become in order to have what you want? Because a lot of us think, and there's this great exercise I learned when I was becoming a coach, that there's this model called be, do, have. And a lot of us start from the other way around. We start with have, do, and then be. So what I mean by this is a lot of us will say to ourselves, I want to have the nice job. I want to have the big house. I want to have the luxury car. And then I can do this, this, and this. And then I can be this person. The reality is it doesn't happen that way. When we become the person that we want to be, then we can do the things we want to do, and then we can have whatever we want to have. And that's where the real change happens. The exercise I sometimes get entrepreneur group of friends to do, just to show them how this works in practice, is I say to them, imagine if you were in a full-time job and you were working for someone, and you were to swap places with Richard Branson for 1 year. And in that 12 months, Richard Branson was to earn your salary and you were to earn Branson's salary. How quickly do you think it would take Branson to multiply your annual salary into something more significant? Now, lots of people say, oh, pretty quickly. He could probably quickly turn it around and make double, triple, or maybe 10 times my annual salary. And I said, so it's not really about the resources then, or it's not really about having everything that he needs to make it happen. He's got it all in here, because he's now the person that can make things happen. He's now the person that can turn the invisible into the visible. He's now the person that can see it before most people and then go out and take action on those ideas. And so that's what I mean about who must you become in order to have what you want. And for me, when I was asking myself that question, before I made the jump out of working for someone to working for myself, it was I had to be someone who had a bias to action. I had to be someone that looked for ways to give value to people wherever I could. I had to be someone that showed up and shared my gifts with the audiences, with the people I spoke to in any way I could. And so once I started focusing on that, I realized I over time became a magnet for opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I've been watching you, you know, social media, and then seeing you go from opportunity to opportunity to opportunity. I saw you with Deepak Chopra the other day. I mean, wow, you are really walking the talk. It's really quite extraordinary. And as you say, it's being open to opportunities that I see you doing. You said earlier, before we press the record button, this idea of, I mean, I always get a bit confused about setting goals, but then being open to all the opportunities. So some of the things that have happened to me in the past, there's no way I could have dreamed of the opportunities that I've had, but they just came my way. But it was more that, you know, being open and constantly looking for opportunities, so that, you know, it built and it built and it built. So how do you balance those two things about, I am going to create a goal to finish my book, or to go running 3 times a week, or whatever it is, but at the same time leave yourself open for, like, you know, I'm going to start canoeing or whatever it is, or write a screenplay instead or something.
So the thing with goals is there's a bit of a paradox here, is you need a goal to give you context for the action to take today. Because if you don't know where you're heading, how do you know what action to take today that would lead to a future? But on the other hand, is once you know the goal, is to put it to one side and focus on the systems and the habits in the present. So this is where the paradox lies, is you need a goal, but then you have to be detached from the goal. And that's what's happened to me over the years, is that yes, I've had a goal of building a successful coaching business, but I wasn't attached to just that goal. I then used that to guide what I did in the moment. So if I wanted to build a successful coaching practice, I had to make sure that I was always scheduling into my diary conversations with people. So I would go to a networking event, I would speak to people in my circle, I would reach out to people online, and I would just keep building conversations to my schedule every single week, because I realized that in order to get people to buy into coaching is fairly abstract if you haven't experienced a coaching session. And so for me, I had to sell people the experience of coaching. And the only way to sell the experience of coaching is through the power of conversation. Because then people get an experience of, wow, I've really enjoyed this conversation. How do I continue this? And so I just did that again and again and again and again. But what happened is I was building habits. I was building a system that would not only allow me to build a successful coaching practice, but because of the way I was having conversations with people and I was challenging them as a coach should, it opened up doors to other opportunities. And this is what is meant by the saying that energy introduces you before you even speak. Now, when you become a magnet for opportunities, it's not that the opportunities just come to you. The reason the opportunities come to you is because people feel some sort of connection to your energy. They feel drawn to you. Now, we might describe this in different ways as charisma, or you know, somebody they just want to help because they feel this person is valuable in some way. But whatever it is, you now become a magnet for opportunities because of your energy, because of the way you show up and are in the world. And it draws people into your field. It's the same experience when you go to a networking event and you see 2 people come up to you. You're drawn more to one person to want to start a conversation with than someone else. But yet none of them have said a single word. And that's energy in action. You're drawn to someone's energy and you just find yourself wanting to introduce yourself to them. And so that's what I found, is the more opportunities I gave myself in sharing my energy with people, the more opportunities I got. A very simple example of something all of us can do immediately is one habit I did at the beginning of my journey, and I still do today, was whenever I connected with somebody on LinkedIn. So if somebody sent me a connection request, or I sent them a connection request and I or they accepted, within a day or two, I would say 8 or 9 times out of 10, I would send them a 7 or 8 second voice note just to say, hey, I'm Simon. Look forward to learning more about your work and happy to be connected. And that was it. It was only 7 or 8 seconds. And I remember some people would send me messages back. And there was one person that had over 80,000 followers on LinkedIn. And he sent me a message back and he said, Simon, I have 80,000 followers on LinkedIn. And that was the first voice note. I have ever received. And so what I realized from that point is that because I was doing something different, it not only got their attention, but it gave them an experience of my energy. And then they became curious to look at my profile, to look at my content, to look at my book, to look at my work. And then the next time we connected, they said, hey, I really enjoy what you're doing. How much would it cost to bring you in to speak at our conference? And yet that would never have happened if I didn't leave that voice note. And so I think, yes, the goal is important, but what's more important in the long term is the habits, the choices, and the systems that you set up today. Because when you got those in place, they help you to win again and again and again and again. And actually, over the long term, you get more than that one goal that you were hoping to get.
But I think there's something more behind it as well. I think there's something about it's about who you're being, because there's sometimes on LinkedIn when people do that, it can be a bit icky, or
Yeah.
I mean, you can think, oh, just leave me alone. But you have got a very positive energy. It feels like, you know, that you're kind of giving rather than trying to take something, which is interesting. So in terms of, you know, you're talking about energy and charisma and all that, how do we develop that kind of, you've got an incredibly positive energy, and as you say, we want to be around people who have positive energy. So how do we develop that in ourselves? Because sometimes, you know, as I say, I could be lazy, I can be grumpy, I can be all of those things. So I sometimes feel like I have pressure. Oh my God. I mean, it was quite a relief when I had to, you know, could stop being the editor of psychology so I could be grumpy. It was great. But how do we work on kind of this kind of, as you say, this charismatic, positive field that's about it? Where does that come from?
To put it simply and concisely, it's to do more of the things that make you feel alive and bring you joy. Because when you're doing those things, naturally, you're going to feel positive.
Yeah.
Naturally, you're going to feel in your element. The things that come naturally to you might not come naturally to other people. And that's why you can express it in a way that is unique to you. You know, when I look at society in general, if you read the papers, if you look at how exhausted employees tend to be across the planet, you know, there was talk in Harvard Business Review of employees across corporate America experiencing a human energy crisis. When you ask a lot of people what exhausts them, what you come to realize is that they're exhausted not because they are physically doing too much, but because one, they are doing too little of the things that bring them joy, and two, they are running someone else's race. And that's why it goes back to something I said earlier, is that if you're not clear on what success means to you, you're going to be chasing someone else's definition. And that is going to be exhausting over time. That is going to be exhausting. So for me, put simply, it's to focus on the things that bring you joy, that make you feel alive. The more you do things that contribute to that, your energy is going to be so different, so much so that everyone around you will notice.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. I am going to hand you over to some questions in a minute from the crowd, from our Heartleapers. But I just wanted to ask one other question before we start. So everybody start thinking of questions. And the question I want to ask you is more about the kind of physical energy. So give us some kind of real lowdown. I mean, around, we want to physically feel better because we feel, you know, our tanks are low, perhaps we've been sick or we've been ill, or we've had COVID, and you want to build yourself up again. What are some great habits, or what do you suggest? I mean, you talked about the joy. I'm thinking, oh, I wonder what joyful habits you could create with your physicality.
So if I focus on the physical energy dimension, when I think about physical energy, I split it into 3 pillars. So the first pillar is sleep and rest. The second pillar is movement, and the third pillar is nutrition. Now, for me, your most productive days begins with having sufficient sleep. Whatever hack or strategy or tip you get given, you simply cannot put it into action unless you've had sufficient rest and sleep. When you look back and you remember those days where you had a full night's sleep, just notice how much more energy you had when you woke up that morning, when you had a full night's sleep. So that's the first thing. And if you want to dive deeper into that topic, I highly recommend looking at Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep. There's some funny anecdotes, but also a lot of home truths that he shares about sleep. And there's one part where he says, the less you sleep, the higher the chances are you're going to die early. Because what happens is when we sleep, that's the body's time to re-energize its immune system. That's the time for the body to recover. That's the time for the body to get back into optimum condition to begin the next day. So what we're doing when we punish ourselves by not sleeping sufficiently is we're actually lowering our body's defenses. We're making it easier to get sickness and disease because our immune system is operating at a far lower level of security. So that's the first pillar of physical energy.
Yeah.
The second is movement. You know, there's always two things I say to people that will elevate your energy immediately. The first is moving your body. You may not always want to do it, but I guarantee once you've done it, you never regret it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with moving your body, is when you move your body, it's not just about the physical side of it. It also impacts your mental energy. When you finish moving your body, whether it's swimming or walking or hiking or going to the gym or going to a park or dancing, whatever it is, yoga, whatever the activity is. And again, the key thing with this is to do activities that bring you joy, activities that actually are suitable for you, because we all have different preferences when it comes to moving our body. But once you've exercised and the day begins, whatever the day throws your way, I guarantee you respond in a very different way once you've moved your body. And that's the wider impact that habit has.
Yeah.
And the third one is nutrition. What are we feeding our bodies with? Because that influences our energetic state. There's an anecdote I share in a book about the football manager Arsene Wenger. When he left the Japanese football team, Nagoya Grampus, to come to London to manage Arsenal Football Club, one of the things he wanted to work on was the team's nutrition. In one interview, he responded to a reporter. He said that if you eat sticky toffee pudding on a regular basis, you're going to play like one when you go on the pitch. And so nutrition was one of those things that he wanted to revolutionize in the camp that he had at Arsenal. And a few years later, that team that he worked with went for an entire season without losing a single match. And they earned the title, the Invincibles, as a result of the changes that he made.
And what were they eating?
They were eating a diet that was much more conducive to elevating the energy. And they were bringing together the elements of rest, of movement, of culture, and nutrition. And these were the pillars that Arsene Wenger wanted to focus on.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. Thank you, Simon, for the physical energy. I'd like to hand it over to our Heartleapers. Have we got any questions, burning questions that anyone would like to ask? So you'll have to unmute yourself.
Hi, I've got a question, if I may.
Hi, Carol.
Hi there. Thank you. That was really, really insightful. And I just love that the notion of giving energy. Because I just think it's, you know, it's like helps you connect with other people's energy. So I'd love to know some ideas. Just as a quick aside, I when you said about that you lost your mum when you were 17, and I was like, oh, that's what happened to me. And I know, Suzy, you have also experienced that loss. And I think sometimes to honour people who we've lost, and also to it makes you want to make the most of life, which it just compels you. You sort of turning something that's terrible and a negative impact into something positive. I found I did a little it was a kindness marathon thing, and it was on my mum passed away when she was 43, and so I did 43 acts of kindness to honour her. And the energy, I mean, I was tired, it's a long day, but the energy I got from doing that it was chunking loads of kindness acts into one. It was kind of a one-off thing, but it gave me this, it lasted. I had this sort of felt euphoric for a whole week. So yeah, my question really is, how can we sort of bring that giving energy into our lives, and does that perhaps impact our spiritual energy as well?
Fantastic. Sorry to hear, Cheryl, and great question, by the way. I mean, when I started my business, one of the books that impacted me, and it's a book that I reread every single year. So often when I'm asked to recommend books, this is, you know, one of the ones I most frequently recommend, which is The Go-Giver by Bob Berg and John David Mann. And it's a short book. It's one that I finished in one night, and I'm sure if you are avid readers, you will also finish it in one night because it's not that long. But it's built around some principles, and the essence of the book is that the secret to success is giving. And I found that the more I give to the world, without any attachment to wanting to receive anything back, not only does it impact me spiritually and bring meaning and purpose into my life, but also what we are essentially doing when we give to the world is we're just planting seeds of kindness. And we have no idea at any given moment which of those seeds will blossom into an orchard. We have no idea. We can't predict the future. But all we can do is just keep spreading the value of kindness wherever we can. And I've seen this both from a practical way within business, but also within my life, manifest into some beautiful things. To give an example, I remember putting on an event a few years back. It was an event space in East London, and I was sending them an email to book the space. And I sent to my contact there, I sent an email saying, how much would it cost? We're looking to book the venue for this date. And she responded a few days later, and she said to me, don't worry, Simon, we've got you covered. You just start selling the tickets and we'll host it on us. And we wish you the best of success for the event. And I was a bit confused. So I sent them a message back and I said to them, hang on a minute, you guys got to make money. I don't mind paying. Just let me know and I'm happy to pay the fee you need for the event. And her response was like, no, this was a message from my boss. He hasn't forgotten the hamper that you sent our entire team last Christmas to say thank you for the work that we did with you the previous year. And I totally forgot about that. Because like I said, when you get into the habit of just adding value, spreading kindness and giving wherever possible without attachment to anything in return, you are planting seeds of kindness that what actually happens inspires other people to do the same thing. And it creates a ripple effect of the world just treating each other in a much healthier and better way.
Yeah, I mean, can I just say that one of the things that make you so memorable, I've done hundreds and hundreds, thousands of interviews in my day, and you're one of the 2 people that's ever sent me a gift after we had an interview. So, and it was great. It's not, it's so nice. So I think, you know, and again, I suppose, so when I was starting my Heartleaper, I reached out to you and, you know, and I remember you. So you do, you know, it is a momentum thing. So it does work, Simon, as well. Anybody else got a question that they'd like to ask? I heard somebody talk about, I think it was Maria, she was talking about blockages. Maria, do you want to talk?
Yes, please. I'd like to ask Simon. I heard you saying that everything begins with a vision of what you want. And I have come across this a few times, including in myself, and I fight against it. And I seem to be in a loop and not being able to overcome it, is when your main problem is not being comfortable with wanting things for yourself. How do you overcome that?
Great question.
Great question. If I may, Maria, just to get some context.
Yeah.
What stops you being comfortable with wanting things for yourself?
Too much of a long story. One of 10, being there for my brothers and sisters when I was a child, all sorts of things. So always putting someone first, then marrying for someone who was very demanding, very, very demanding, and I want never get, some sort of quite toxic and abusive relationships, which I've managed to successfully come out of it to inspire. I have 3 daughters, so I have to inspire these women, you know, that they cannot find themselves in that position. But even if they do, they have to know to fall and get up and fall and get up until you're out. And I always say that the feather, there's far more than the fist. It is just, it's the way it was always for me. We were very poor, but surrounded with tremendous amount of love. And when that disintegrated because we grew and separated and everybody went their own ways, I haven't been able to find that love. I find the world quite tough and scary and frightening, and because I moved countries and accommodate cultures, so I always had to withdraw. And I cannot get over I know that I'm not getting there. I work very hard, but I still can't break that blockage, that inner blockage of I want, and I will succeed. You know, so
Great question. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you for sharing that, Maria, and being transparent. Well, it sounds like you've come through a lot to be where you are today, and it's also made you the person you are today. And I think that overcoming blockages and starting to work on yourself when you've gone through what you've gone through isn't going to be an overnight process. But you shared that you also have children, 2 children, if I'm correct.
Yeah, 3 girls.
Yeah, 2 girls. And I think what to do here is to begin first to ask yourself, who do you want your girls to become when they grow up? Because what you can then begin tapping into is you begin to embody some of the values you want to see them accept and embrace as they grow up. Because I think if we can find a reason outside of ourselves, so in this case, your 2 daughters here, that can bring out and awaken parts of us that have been dormant for so long. You know, even when I became a father for the first time, I found new levels of energy that I never imagined, because I think parenthood can do that to you. When you've got children and you want things to be good for them when they grow up, the person they're going to be looking up to is you. And I think if you can include them as part of your reason to imagine the impact it would have on them when you start doing more things for you, when you start living for yourself, and I think that could have a profound impact, Maria.
Yeah, it already. I've turned 60 recently, and I understand exactly what you're saying, because instinctively that's the way I thought that I have to go. Because I've learned, and as you say, as a parent, you know that your children copy you. Yeah, it is just their instinct. They do it as children, and I would imagine as adults, maybe not as much. You know, some go the other way, whatever. But it is around there. But it is a hard one, and I'm certainly reading like Suzy. Suzy has been a great. She's been a miracle in my life, to be fair, if I'm honest. And her enthusiasm to start with, and her knowledge and her comfortableness and everything else, but also the reading and the writer and things like that. But it is, as you say, it's not an overnight process. But I barely recognize the person that I was once, that I once was. So I can certainly, I'm not going to give up. You know, let's just put it like that.
I love that, Maria. And I think that what you shared is a beautiful reminder about the benefits of life's challenges. You know, I look back at my life and I note that in my darkest setbacks and challenges and moments in my life, they were also the very same things that equipped me with the wisdom to build the most beautiful moments of my life.
Yeah.
And there's I got my book here, but there's one quote that just comes to my head that I'd love to share very quickly, because I think it connects to what you shared, Maria. And it's a quote from the author Haruki Murakami, and it says, "And once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain: when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what this storm is all about."
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Thank you. Maria, thank you so much for being
Welcome.
honest and vulnerable. Simon, I think I've got some more questions, but otherwise I think you're going to be here all night. So Simon, I would just like to say thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Suzy, I'm happy to take a couple more if that's okay.
Oh, okay,
everybody.
that's fine
Yep.
by me. So we've got a question here from Liz. She has a question about how to build your mental energy when your brain feels fried. So,
Perfect. Yep, I see in the chat there.
yeah,
So how to build mental energy when your brain feels fried? Well, immediately just disconnect. I mean, in an ideal world, you don't want to get to the point when your brain feels fried, because that's when you're at that point of feeling burnt out. So one of the things I get people to do in their calendars as best as you can, because I understand we all have different constraints and different lifestyles, is you want to make sure that you block in your calendar me time as quickly and as efficiently as you do with meeting invites that you click yes to, or social events or holidays. Because we're very quick to say yes to meetings and social events, but how quick are we to block in me time just for you, just empty space just to be? So your brain doesn't get to that point of feeling fired. Because otherwise, if you don't block in me time in your diary, what's going to happen, and this is the reality for many of us, is that you suddenly have all these things coming to your calendar. You're saying yes to them. Before you know it, you've got back-to-back meetings, back-to-back appointments that you have to commit to. And before you know it, you get to the end of the week and think, where did all that time go? And so we've got to live each day with intention. And a simple question to get that process starting is, if you're planning a week ahead, is to ask yourself, how will I know that this week will have been a productive one? If you're planning your day on a day-by-day basis, simply ask yourself, how will I know that today will have been a productive one? And work backwards. It's applying the principle that Stephen Covey first spoke about in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, of beginning with the end in mind. When you begin with the end in mind of what you want out of your week, what you want out of your day, then you are putting in measures to avoid you getting to the point when your brain feels fried. So if your brain feels fried, for me, that's your body's signal saying, hey, you've got to start slowing down here. You've got to take your foot off the gas pedal for a moment and just rejuvenate, reset, and recharge. So that's what I would say. Ideally, you don't want to get to that point where your brain is fried. But if it is, the immediate solution is you just need some time and clear space to allow your mind to recharge.
yeah, that's great.
Thank you. That is great.
Thank you, Liz. Adela, you've got a question about big energy. What does that mean?
Yeah, so hi Simon, great
Hey,
talk.
Adela.
Thank you so much. And also, just to follow up on your question, the productivity planner, I just put the name of that in the chat because
Fantastic.
one question you said, I love it. It brings out that the answer. So that was a great segue. I'm someone who's got really big energy. What recommendations do you have to manage big energy? Especially when you feel like you might be exploited, you know. So I'm going a bit disruptive here.
So because big energy can have different impacts, what sort of scenario comes to mind where you think it could be used against you?
So actually, it's interesting you talk about the go-giver. So I am your classic go-giver. So I leave voice notes with people. I always give a lot of, I'm very generous. I lead with generosity. But I have noticed that does end up leaving a bit of a breadcrumb of people thinking they can always get stuff for free. Or, you know, me thinking, right, I need boundaries here. I need to stop people pleasing. So it's kind of preserving that energy.
Definitely.
But,
so I think that you, on the one hand, you can still doing what you mentioned in terms of the giving. So like I said, I still give voice notes out. I've been doing that since I started my journey as an entrepreneur. I still give, you know, messages and gifts of appreciation when I've been helped or someone's been championing my work. But at the same time, on the other side, you also need boundaries. Because you can still give, but at the same time, you do need to protect your own energy. I mean, that's why I dedicated one part of my book called Protect Your Energy, because yes, great to give, great to plant those seeds of kindness, but you're only one person at the end of the day. So you've got to protect your own energy. Otherwise, you're not going to make progress in the areas of your life that you want to make progress in, because now you're beholden to everyone else's schedules and demands. So you've got to start thinking, number one, what is the vision I'm working towards? What do I have to do to get there? What are the steps, the plans, and so on, and the habits I need to embrace? And number two, what are the things that I want to say yes and no to? So you got to start being clear with that, because what happens is when you do get those requests coming in, once you're clear on what's a yes and what is a no, you're going to avoid those maybes. Now, there's a funny conversation I had on a podcast recently where we talked about hell yes and hell no. And what I said is that so many of us, instead of only saying yes to the hell yeses, we say yes to the hell maybes, even though we don't really want to do them. And so we still go do them, even though we know we're going to be drained of energy and we really would rather be doing something else. We say yes to them. So you really want to be clear what is an absolute yes for me and what is an absolute no. And if I'm going to say yes to the one I'm not sure about, what has to be in place for that to be a no-brainer? And if you can start communicating those boundaries to people, people will respect them, because then that becomes the way you work. One of my clients was a Michelin star chef, and the boundaries he had was that on Wednesdays, he wouldn't check emails apart from the morning and evenings. So because that was communicated at the end of each email he sent, people knew that they wouldn't get their response until either after 5 or late morning. So people over time actually just work around the boundaries you communicate.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. I like it. I like the fact that I think the hell maybes might be creeping into the hell yeses. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think we had a couple more there, Suzy.
Yeah, well, there's one from Erin here. I can see how to overcome discouragement as you age and still have dreams to make happen.
Okay, Erin is
Erin right here.
Erin,
hi, Simon.
So,
nice to meet you. I just got your book. I was reading it.
Fantastic. Can't wait for you to dive into it. So
yeah,
Erin's taking in from New York.
I'm from New York. I think part of my question is I just turned 65. So boy, you look back at your life in a big way, and I'm seeing where I've always done with my parents, and you know, I'm in corporate America. The scary part is the last time I really felt energized was November 2019 on a vacation. And my industry has changed and it's just not fun. And I still need to work a few more years, but I still have dreams and I've never made them happen. And that's my question is, what do you do to overcome the discouragement to still pursue the things that kind of seem like you never could make them happen?
Simplest answer I could give to that is find people who are at your age or older who have achieved or are achieving their dreams and use that as inspiration. Because sometimes we just need to have an example of someone who is doing the thing that we want, but is overcoming the barrier we think we have in front of us.
Okay.
And again, if you've got my book, it just sort of a great story comes to my head here. It's in Keep Your Energy Alive. I think it's one of the final chapters. And here we go. There was an 81-year-old Japanese woman, Masako Wakamiya, who only decided to learn how to write code after she retired as a banking clerk. And within just a few years, that app got over 100,000 downloads. And she ended up traveling to Los Angeles to speak at the Apple Developers Conference alongside CEO Tim Cook. And she is 81 years old at the time of me writing the book. So she's a bit older now. But we just need to find examples of people who have overcome the barriers we think we have in order to have achieved the dreams that are meaningful for them.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed
the question.
So much.
We've got time for one last question. Juliet on burnout. Juliet, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Hi, Simon.
Hey, Juliet.
So I guess my question's a bit of like the reverse of the life being too short thing, because I got diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma just before the pandemic, went through treatment and everything. So felt like I'd lost like a year and a half. So I'm the opposite now in that I'm constantly feeling on catch up and I drive myself a bit crazy in how much I do. I'm also being referred for ADHD, so I definitely think there's a big element of that in this kind of sense of urgency and drive all the time. So I can feel either really energized or really completely exhausted. And I guess, just kind of strategies around how you try and balance that. I mean, I'm conscious of it and I do write things in my planner, you know, time out and all the rest of it. I also kind of try and avoid too much peopling, as I call it. So I can go for like a couple of days of peopling and then I need space, nature, time on my own to kind of recuperate. So I do that, but I just feel at the moment, I think because I am a person that seeks the opportunities and the challenges, and thankfully lots come my way, I almost don't want to waste time not doing them. So I do them, but probably at the risk of me being knackered, if you know what I mean.
Well, the first thing to appreciate, and it goes back to something I may have mentioned in different ways through the session, is that while anything is possible, not everything is possible.
Yeah.
One thing we have to constantly remind ourselves, yes, in life, anything is possible, but not everything is possible. Because each day you are going to have to make trade-offs. I mean, trade-offs are just a part of living. So when you say yes to one thing, simultaneously you're saying no to something else. So the challenge when it comes to people who feel like they're not doing enough, it tends to be those who are ambitious and they think that if I rest, I'm giving up on opportunities, or if I take some time off, I'm missing out on being able to do more work to move forward in a particular area. So one of the things we've got to understand is that whenever we make progress forward, there are certain few things that drive the majority of our progress. And how can we hone in on those things so we can leverage the impact that those things have? Otherwise, we can do lots and lots of things which may look important, but aren't really important. And instead of focusing on those things, we end up asking ourselves, well, how can I start to prioritize so that the things that have the ultimate leverage on moving me forward will actually do so? And there's a great question that I often ask people when they are sort of similar to your situation, Julia. I would say to them, if you only had 3 hours today to get your work done and what you needed to do to move forward, what is the one thing at a minimum you would want to have accomplished? And begin there. Because, and it goes back to something I was asked in an interview recently when somebody said, Simon, now you've become a father, do you find yourself more or less productive than before you were a parent? And I've actually said I find myself more productive now I'm a parent, because before I'm a parent, you've got all of this time to procrastinate. You've got all of this time to be stuck in your head with decisions. But once you're a parent, and I know that my child is in nursery for only so many hours, and once I pick her up, my night's gone, my weekend's gone, I'm going to be with her on the weekends and the evenings. I now have a very small window to get things done. And it forces me to prioritize. And so I would just start there, start assessing the activities that you do. How much of those are really important? And how many of those really push you forward to where you want to be? And how can you focus more on those activities?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for tonight. It's been brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Simon, we're going to leave it there because you're getting a croaky voice, and I don't. I don't
want to add as much value as I can while I'm on here.
But Simon, where can people get hold of you if they want to know more about you, hire you as a coach, hire you as a speaker? I know that we've got quite some fabulous people on this call. We've got people from all over corporate America, as well as some very delicious organizations in the UK listening to you today. So if people wanted to hire you, how would they do that?
Sure. So I'm on all the social media platforms, the major ones, but the two I use the most are LinkedIn. So you can just find me by searching Simon Alexander Ong on LinkedIn, or Instagram. My handle is @SimonAlexanderO. And if you wanted to find out more about the book, it's getenergizebook.com, Energize with a Z. And I guess in terms of speaking, I guess these are more for London-based people at the moment. I'm speaking at Carfest at the end of August. So I'll be speaking on the Sparfest stage alongside Dr. Rangan Chatterjee.
Oh my God, that's so cool. He's so brilliant. Two of you together, imagine that. My God. Damn.
And then I'll be speaking, I should be at a author book signing and Q&A in person at the Battersea Bookshop. I think that date will be confirmed, but I think it'll be 19th of September. So if you wanted to come along, get your book signed, I will be at the Battersea Bookshop doing an evening event there on the 19th of September. It'll probably go out soon because we're still a while away. And yeah, so those are my upcoming events if you are based in London.
Simon, thank you so much for your time and your energy today. You kind of model it so well about how to give out this positive energy to the world. It's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Suzy. Thank you so much for having me. And if any of you did have questions that you did not get answered, that you want to get answered, just drop me a message on LinkedIn, and I look forward to continuing the conversation there.
Thank you. And thank you, Heartleapers. Thank you. This is our first big one. So thank you so much. Lots of love.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Lots of love.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.